Now, to repeat, guys, there is a bug in the system that's happening right now. There's currently a bug, okay? Okay, perfect. All right. What that bug looks like is Airbnb has had listing views fall off of a cliff. If you have a listing that is a luxury property 16 plus and your nightly rate is $1,000 a night, or if you have a listing that can sleep 7, 8, 10 people and your nightly rate's like $600 a night, all of these listings are at a risk right now. My friend showed me that on Friday, all of her views just started going away. She calls me up and says, hey, Sean, I'm not showing up in search anymore. I don't know what to do. I can't find anything. I don't know why I'm shadow banned, but if I go into incognito search, my listing's not showing up. And she's got one of the best listings in the city, one of the absolute best in the city. So let me show you what I found when I searched for her listing myself. I could not find her. In the area that she exists in, there's only 5 total listings in the area that she exists, right? For just any range, right? For any weekend over the next 6 months. But I found out when I went to search filter that there's an upper limit of $1,100 on that search filter. Airbnb used to have it where it would just be like $999 plus, any listings up, right? Well, now, if I manually updated that price from $1,100 to say $1,500 or $20,000, now that 6th listing, her listing, shows up because her listing is quote unquote too expensive for the initial search. Now, I thought that this bug was a mistake, but I went and I looked. Airbnb is intentionally setting an upper limit on search prices for listings based on occupancy. Check this one out. This is actually really freaking nuts. So when we go and check, I did a search in another city just to try to make this as fresh and new as possible. I did a search for 0 guests, 8 guests, and 12 guests. And if you look at the price points, it goes from like 500 and something, I believe it goes to 780, and then it goes up to 1,200 for 12 guests in this city, right? And every city, these numbers are different. So what Airbnb is doing now is Airbnb is deciding that when a guest searches for a property, based on the number of guests traveling to that city, they're choosing what the manual upper limit for search is going to be and cutting all luxury properties out of search. How nuts is that? Right? So you need to, all of you, what you need to do is you need to go into your area and search in your area. I don't know how many listings or how many people you can sleep, like if your place can sleep 4 or your place can sleep 6 or your place can sleep 12. If you're a bigger property that can sleep 12, I want you to search at 10. I want you to find out for a group of 10, how much money is Airbnb setting that upper limit at? And you need to find out if you're properly priced at that upper limit. And now this is actually going to really screw up a lot of people's pricing strategies, because now as I'm telling you this, the only thing that I can think of is for you to use a per customer price point change. I think Airbnb is now trying to influence people into setting into their pricing settings a per customer cost. It would absolutely be nuts. It would totally be nuts. So if you find that for 8 people, Airbnb wants the max to be $550, and then for like 10 people, the max to be $620, and then for 12 people, the max to be $700, you might need to set your base rate at $530 or $540, and then have a per person price of like say $50 per person after that. I really don't like this because I don't want a listing that can sleep 12 people sleeping 8 people, right? I want to take that away. I want the people, I want a group of 8 to pay just as much as a group of 12 if somebody's going to book far in the future. So for now, I need you guys to know that this exists so you guys can go test what the upper limit is on your local search, and you can redo your prices to make sure that you show up in search. Because if you have a luxury property, if you have a good property, you are not getting shown in search. So for any of you who said views fell off a cliff last weekend, this is exactly what's going on. Airbnb is deciding how much is too much. And I noticed that my studios were having a visibility problem, and now we know why. My studios in Austin just went junk because we've got good studios that have an expensive price point. So now we're getting screwed, and you guys all need to know this. And so it's kind of like the algorithm issue that we had earlier, right? Airbnb made this algorithm change and everybody just fell out of search. And that's because during the winter bust, they did this winter release and they just decided to make some changes. They advertised some, didn't advertise the others. And this is one of those things that they did not advertise. So moving forward, guys, just so you know, I will be doing updates on my website. You guys may or may not have the details on my website. It is just rockygeach.com. And if you guys want to have access to that, I even just put a QR code, nice and easy for you right there. And you guys can just snap that and then go to rockygeach.com. And I think at this point, guys, we should switch to VRBO as much as we can. So that is a QR code for you to go log in VRBO and add yourself on VRBO right now, because the thing I think we need to do, like proactively as hosts, is we need to diversify so that way when Airbnb does something stupid like this, that's not the only channel that you're relying on. Because like right now, VRBO is not setting an upper limit on search. So your $2,000 a night listing will still show up on VRBO, no surprises. And I really want you guys to consider going multi-platform this year, making those changes, okay? This is what we have for now. You could use a per person price point thing, and I really don't like using that, but that could be a solution for any of you guys who are cool with a group of 8 paying $200 less than a group of 12. It could be a way that keeps you in search, because what happened to her, and I'll tell you the implications, she's now on page 5. She dropped her prices down so that way she was showing up in search, but now she'll only show up on page 5 of search. Even though she's always been one of the top 4, top 6 listings in the city, she's now on page 5 because when I showed you this other photo, we'll go back to it, what happened to her is she fell into this negative feedback loop. Like I said in the re-algorithm webinar, which on my website you guys can still get the re-algorithm webinar, what I said is Airbnb has a feedback loop that will cause a slow decay for listings. Now when her listing views dropped off a cliff like this and she started getting 5, 10 views a day instead of 250 views a day, this falling off of a cliff for an extended period of time, what that does is that feeds an algorithm negative information saying, oh, this listing is not interesting. So now her calendar goes empty, and that lack of bookings in her calendar also feeds the algorithm going, oh, this listing is not interesting. And so the permanent negative feedback loop now puts her on page 5 when her listing is $200 less than non-Superhost, non-interesting listings. They're performing better than her because they've always just been cheaper and they stayed in search when Airbnb made this change. So again, for those of you who just maybe tuned in, Airbnb has a bug. It's intentional, but they had no clue what they did wrong, I'm pretty sure. They set an upper limit on search parameters. And so what'll happen is when you go to search for your listing, if your listing is expensive, it's going to show that you don't show up, because if you look at that middle photo, that right number says 1100. It should say 1100 plus, like 1100 into infinity or something like that. Airbnb is no longer showing all listings into infinity on the high side. They're actually setting a cap, and they're doing it based on guest count. If you look at this photo, they're deciding how expensive listings are allowed to be based on how many guests that they can hold. I want you guys all to go to your local city, search for listings and find out what that cap is, notate that cap per guest, and then restructure your prices for the next 5 or so weeks, your last minute prices. You need to basically restructure those so you still get views and you still get bookings over the next 3 weeks. If you don't do this, the next 3 weeks of your calendar, if you have a luxury property, the next 3, 4, 5 weeks of your calendar could end up going empty, and that'll just cycle you down in the algorithm. Be safe, guys. If you have any questions, put them in the comments.